Have you ever noticed something that no one else seems to see? A truth that whispers from the shadows, a dream that feels more real than waking life. To see what others cannot is both a gift and a danger. Tonight, we descend into the hidden corridors of the unconscious, guided by the words of Carl Jung, to uncover why deeper vision can both save and destroy the soul. Have you ever felt that strange, unsettling moment when you notice something others cannot? When you see behind the mask of everyday life, when you sense a pattern, a hidden order, or perhaps a silent warning that no one else dares to acknowledge, it feels as though the universe has whispered a secret into your ear, one too heavy to repeat, and yet too powerful to ignore. This, my friend, is the beginning of what Carl Jung would call the isolation of insight. To see what others do not is not merely a matter of intelligence or perception. It is an initiation into a deeper layer of reality, a place where the unconscious speaks in symbols, archetypes, and images that most people never confront. When this hidden dimension reveals itself to you, you become marked, different, separate, other. The isolation does not arise because you have withdrawn from the world, but because the world itself cannot yet bear the weight of what you have glimpsed. Society, as Jung often observed, thrives on shared illusions. We create collective myths, values, and structures so that we can live together without being overwhelmed by chaos. The collective mind fears disruption. It fears anything that breaks the fragile balance of order it has built. And so, when one individual suddenly perceives a deeper truth, something beneath the agreed upon surface, they become alien to the very society they inhabit. Their vision sets them apart, and in this separation begins the painful loneliness of the seer. Imagine a prophet standing in the marketplace, shouting of storms to come, while the townspeople laugh and shake their heads. Not because the storm is unreal, but because they cannot yet admit it. To acknowledge such a vision would unravel too many comforts, too many certainties, and so the prophet becomes an outcast. In the same way, when you carry an insight that others cannot yet hold, you find yourself set apart, not by choice, but by the very nature of what you know. This isolation is not only external, it is also profoundly internal. For the one who sees more must also wrestle with their own sense of disconnection. You may begin to question yourself, am I imagining things? Have I gone too far into my own thoughts? Why do others not feel what I feel, not recognize what I recognize? Such questions haunt the visionary soul. They become a constant echo, gnawing at the boundary between sanity and madness. Jung himself understood this risk intimately, for he knew that to encounter the unconscious too deeply is to walk the razor's edge between illumination and disintegration. And yet, the isolation of insight is not simply a punishment. It is also a test. To be alone with vision is to discover the strength or weakness of your own inner foundation. Without the comfort of agreement, without the validation of the crowd, you are left to confront your truth alone. And here lies the danger: many cannot endure it. Some retreat, burying their insight under layers of denial, choosing the safety of conformity over the burden of clarity. Others are consumed, overwhelmed by the intensity of what they have perceived, losing themselves in obsession or despair. But the few who endure, who hold their vision with patience, who learn to integrate what they have seen, become something extraordinary. They become carriers of wisdom, not because they force the world to see what they see, but because they embody it. Their very being becomes a living bridge between the conscious order of society and the unconscious depths where truth hides. They do not shout their revelations in the marketplace. They live them quietly, steadily, until time itself brings their vision into collective awareness. The loneliness of such a path cannot be overstated. It is a solitude that eats at the heart, because the human spirit craves connection, recognition, the warmth of belonging. To walk with knowledge others do not share is to feel the constant ache of distance, even when surrounded by people. You laugh with them, speak with them, live among them, Yet always there is a part of you unseen, unheard, unacknowledged. This is the archetypal fate of the outsider, the one whose perception has outpaced the group. And yet, Jung reminds us that this isolation is not meaningless. It is itself part of the individuation process, the great journey of becoming who you truly are. The individual must be separated from the collective, must taste the bitterness of solitude, if they are to discover the depths of their own psyche. Without this separation, the self remains entangled in the illusions of the group, never finding its authentic voice. Isolation, painful as it is, becomes the crucible in which the true self is formed. To see what others do not, then, is to live in two worlds at once: the world of appearances, where society clings to its shared illusions, and the world of deeper reality, where symbols, dreams, and hidden truths reveal themselves. Holding both worlds together without collapsing into either is perhaps the greatest challenge of the visionary soul. Too much in the collective, and you drown in conformity. Too much in the depths, and you are consumed by the unconscious. But to walk between, to carry insight while still moving among the everyday, is to live at the edge of human experience. This edge is sharp, it cuts, but it also awakens, for in the very ache of being unseen lies the possibility of discovering your own essence. The part of you that does not need approval, does not need validation, because it is rooted in something eternal. This essence is not given lightly. It is carved through the loneliness of insight, through the silence of nights when no one understands, through the weight of visions you cannot fully explain. The isolation of insight is, in the end, the destiny of those who dare to see. It is the path of the dreamer, the mystic, the artist, the thinker, the one who hears the whispers of the unconscious before the world is ready to listen. It is not a comfortable path, but it is a real one, and in that reality, something profound begins to take shape. To see what others do not is not only a matter of higher awareness or special perception, it is also a confrontation with darkness. For every truth revealed carries with it a shadow, and the one who sees beyond the surface must face not only light, but also the abyss that hides beneath it. Carl Jung understood this better than most. He knew that the human psyche is not composed solely of noble ideals and shining insights. It is also haunted by the shadow, that vast reservoir of instincts, fears, and impulses we deny. And when you begin to perceive truths invisible to others, you also begin to awaken the shadow of vision. The shadow is not a distant monster lurking outside of us. It is within. It is the double we pretend does not exist, the other face we do not show the world, the hidden part of the soul that contains both our deepest wounds and our untapped power. Seeing what others cannot means tearing away the veil that conceals this presence. You may think you are only uncovering hidden truths about society, about the world, about patterns that others overlook. But sooner or later, the gaze turns inward. What you see outside is a mirror, reflecting something inside. And in that reflection, you discover the parts of yourself that you have exiled. Imagine realizing that the corruption you criticize in the world also exists as a seed within your own nature. Imagine uncovering truths about power, desire, or cruelty that echo with a strange familiarity in your own heart. This is the danger Jung spoke of. The visionary who peers into the unconscious is not only granted divine revelations, but also forced to meet the darkness that lies at the core of their own humanity. And once seen, the shadow cannot be forgotten. It clings to you, whispers to you, demanding acknowledgement. This confrontation is dangerous because it destabilizes identity. Most people live with a carefully constructed mask, a persona designed to protect them from uncomfortable truths. They believe themselves kind, moral, rational, controlled. But when vision cuts through the illusion, the mask begins to crumble. The shadow emerges, showing you that you are not as innocent, not as pure, not as in control as you believed. For some, this realization shatters their sense of self. They fall into despair, believing themselves corrupted. For others, the shadow becomes seductive, pulling them into obsession, consuming them with impulses they cannot master. But there is another danger. Society itself resists shadow vision. Those who speak of the shadow, who reveal the darker undercurrents of culture or humanity, are often silenced. We do not want to see what contradicts the myth of progress, order, or morality. We reject the one who forces us to look at the collective shadow, the cruelty of our systems, the violence we condone, the emptiness behind our ideals. And so the visionary who reveals the shadow is branded dangerous, not because they are wrong, but because they show too much. The shadow of vision is not simply evil, though. It is raw energy, primal truth, the part of the psyche that has been denied expression. Jung insisted that wholeness cannot come without facing this shadow, integrating it into conscious life rather than repressing it. To see what others do not is therefore to inherit a double responsibility, not only to bear the insight itself, but to integrate the shadow it reveals. Without this integration, vision becomes destruction. Think of the artist who channels visions of beauty, but cannot withstand the darkness that accompanies inspiration. Think of the prophet who speaks truths yet falls victim to their own pride and self-delusion. Think of the revolutionary who sees injustice with clarity, but is consumed by violence when their shadow overtakes them. These figures remind us that the gift of vision is also a curse if the shadow is not confronted. In your own life, the shadow of vision might appear as fear, self-doubt, or even a destructive impulse that rises just when you thought you were reaching clarity. You may notice it in dreams, dark figures chasing you, faces you cannot recognize, monsters that seem both threatening and strangely familiar. These are not random terrors. They are symbols of the shadow emerging, demanding to be seen alongside the truth you are discovering. The unconscious does not grant only light. It delivers a balance. For every revelation of wisdom, there is an equal revelation of darkness. This is why Jung warned that the path of deeper sight is not safe. It is not a comfortable journey into inspiration alone. It is a descent, like Orpheus into the underworld, a journey through fear, chaos, and temptation. The shadow is not your enemy, but it will test you. It will strip away illusions, confront you with the truth of your own nature, and ask whether you are strong enough to bear it. To see the shadow and deny it is the greatest danger of all, for then it grows stronger in secret, distorting your vision, twisting your insights into delusions. You may believe you are serving truth, when in fact you are possessed by your own hidden darkness. Jung often spoke of the danger of inflation. When an individual identifies too much with their vision, believing themselves above others, chosen, special. This inflation is the shadow disguising itself as light. It is the fall of the visionary, the trap of those who cannot hold the tension between light and dark. The true task is to recognize the shadow without becoming it, to acknowledge its presence without letting it dominate. It is to hold both realities, the higher insight and the darker truth, the vision of possibility and the acknowledgement of corruption, the call of the self and the weight of instinct. This balance is not easy, but it is the only way forward. Jung believed that the shadow, once integrated, becomes a source of vitality. What once terrified us, once hidden in shame, transforms into strength, creativity, and authenticity. The shadow of vision, then, is not merely a burden. It is the necessary counterpart to any genuine awakening. To see what others do not is to bring forth light. But every light casts a shadow, and every vision demands the courage to face it. To see what others do not is not simply a revelation. It is a weight, a demand placed upon the soul. Carl Jung called this the burden of consciousness, and it is one of the most difficult trials a human being can endure. Consciousness is not just awareness of the external world, of facts and events. It is the inner awakening to hidden truths, archetypes, and the shadowed depths of the psyche. It is the moment when the veil is torn away, and suddenly, you cannot return to the innocence of ignorance. What has been seen cannot be unseen, and what has been awakened cannot be put back to sleep. This burden comes because consciousness is not neutral. To become aware of something means that it now demands your response. You cannot simply observe it and walk away. The unconscious reveals, and in that revelation comes responsibility. If you see the patterns of destruction in your own behavior, you must choose whether to change or continue. If you see the illusions society lives under, you must decide whether to conform or resist. If you see the shadow within yourself, you must choose whether to deny it or integrate it. Consciousness always calls for action, and in this call lies the weight. Jung often warned that most people do not want to be conscious. They prefer the safety of habit, the comfort of the collective mind, the simplicity of believing what they are told. To awaken beyond this is to step outside the protective shield of the group. Suddenly, you see through the masks, and with that vision comes isolation, responsibility, and sometimes despair. You realize that life is not as simple as it once seemed, that you are not as innocent as you believed, that existence itself carries a darker complexity. The burden of consciousness is that you can no longer know these truths. Consider how a dream can disturb you, not because of its surface images, but because of what it reveals. A nightmare might expose a hidden fear, a suppressed desire, or a truth about your relationships you did not want to face. When you wake, the dream lingers, haunting you with knowledge you did not ask for. This is the nature of consciousness itself. Once the unconscious breaks through, it does not politely return to silence. It follows you, reminding you of your responsibility to integrate what you now know. And this responsibility weighs heavily. There is also the burden of carrying what others cannot yet see. Imagine being aware of a danger no one else acknowledges, or sensing the psychological wounds in another person that they themselves deny. To carry this awareness is lonely, because you cannot force others to see what they are not ready to see. You must hold the vision quietly, waiting for the moment when it can be expressed or transformed. In the meantime, you bear the tension of knowing while living among those who remain blind. This tension is exhausting, because it forces you to live in two worlds at once: the world of ordinary appearances and the deeper reality revealed by consciousness. The burden deepens when consciousness turns inward. Jung insisted that true awareness is not just about observing the outer world, but about uncovering the inner one. And what lies within is not always pleasant. To realize the full scope of your shadow, your contradictions, your hidden motives, is a heavy revelation. Many cannot endure it. They retreat into denial, choosing the comfort of illusion over the sharp edge of truth. But for those who cannot turn away, the burden is immense. You see yourself stripped bare, vulnerable, flawed. Consciousness becomes a mirror that never lies, a mirror you cannot escape. This is why Jung described individuation, the process of becoming whole, as a path that demands suffering. It is not suffering for its own sake, but the suffering that comes from carrying more truth than the ordinary mind is prepared for. Consciousness expands the soul, but expansion stretches and tears before it heals. Each new revelation feels like a wound, because it forces you to shed an old identity, an old certainty, an old comfort. And yet, through these wounds, the self is born. The danger, of course, is that consciousness can overwhelm. Without integration, without balance, the weight of awareness can crush rather than liberate. Many who glimpse too deeply into the unconscious become fragmented, unable to reconcile what they have seen with the demands of ordinary life. They may become consumed by visions, obsessions, or despair. This is why Jung compared the unconscious to a great sea, beautiful, mysterious, but also capable of drowning those who dive too deep without preparation. Consciousness, then, is a burden because it requires not only courage to face the truth, but strength to carry it and skill to weave it into life. The burden is also collective. When one person becomes conscious, they often see not only their own shadow, but also the shadow of their culture, their society, their age. They see the hypocrisies, the lies, the hidden violence that others accept as normal. To see this is painful, because it forces you to recognize the sickness in the very structures that shape your existence. You may feel powerless to change it, yet unable to ignore it. You carry the awareness like a fire inside you, one that burns even as it illuminates. And so, the burden of consciousness is not simply about knowledge. It is about transformation. It asks whether you will allow the weight to crush you, or whether you will grow strong enough to bear it. But strength here is not force. It is patience, humility, and the willingness to carry paradox. Consciousness does not give simple answers. It reveals complexity, contradiction, mystery. The burden is learning to live with this mystery without fleeing back into illusion, without collapsing under despair, without losing yourself in arrogance. The gift of sight always comes with a cost. To awaken is to carry what others cannot, to live with truths that are uncomfortable, and to walk through life with a weight pressing upon your soul. This is why so many resist awakening, and why those who embrace it often feel marked, different, set apart. It is not that they sought this weight, but that the unconscious demanded it of them. Consciousness chooses its carriers, and once chosen, you cannot lay it down. There comes a point, after the isolation of vision, after the confrontation with the shadow, and after the burden of consciousness has made its weight known, when the individual must ask, "What now?" For to see what others do not is only the beginning. The deeper question is what one does with such sight. This is where Carl Jung placed his greatest emphasis, the process of individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating the unconscious with the conscious, uniting the fragments of the psyche into a whole. Individuation is not about perfection, nor is it about rising above others as if you were chosen or superior. It is about wholeness. It is about becoming the full expression of who you are, not just the mask you present to society, not just the parts of yourself that are acceptable or easy to carry. To individuate is to gather the rejected pieces of your soul, the shadow, the forgotten desires, the unlived potentials, and to bring them into relationship with your conscious life. It is to take the dangerous vision that sets you apart and allow it to transform you from within. The path is not straight. It winds through dream, symbol, suffering, and revelation. At first, it feels like being torn apart because the conscious ego resists what the unconscious demands. The ego clings to old identities, familiar comforts, the narrow image it has built of itself. But individuation asks for surrender. It asks for you to admit that you are more than you imagined and less than you pretended. This is why it is so difficult. Individuation threatens the ego's control. It asks you to bow before something greater. The self, the totality of your being, the center that holds both your light and your darkness. To walk this path is to live in dialogue with symbols. Dreams cease to be random, they become messages, fragments of the soul trying to reach consciousness. Archetypes rise from within the wise old man, the great mother, the trickster, the hero. They are not mere stories or fictions. They are living patterns in the psyche, guiding forces that shape the way we move through life. The danger of seeing what others do not is that these archetypes awaken suddenly, and if they are not recognized, they can possess the individual. But in individuation, the task is not to suppress these forces, nor to be enslaved by them, but to recognize them as part of the larger whole. Imagine a man who has always seen himself as rational, logical, untouched by emotion. One night, he dreams of drowning in a vast sea, waves pulling him under. If he ignores the dream, it becomes a haunting, a symptom that follows him in waking life as anxiety or despair. But if he attends to it, if he recognizes the symbol, he sees that the unconscious is calling him to acknowledge the emotional depths he has denied. By integrating this realization, he grows closer to wholeness. This is individuation in practice, the willingness to listen to the voice of the unconscious, to weave its truth into conscious living. But this process is not only internal, It changes the way one stands in the world. The individuated person no longer seeks blind conformity, nor do they reject society out of prideful rebellion. Instead, they walk as themselves, authentic, rooted, unshaken by the shifting illusions of the collective. They may still feel the loneliness of insight, but now it is transformed. It is no longer the isolation of being misunderstood, but the solitude of inner strength. They know who they are, even if others do not. The path of individuation is also deeply symbolic of death and rebirth. Jung often described the psyche as requiring transformation that feels like destruction. Old identities must die, illusions must collapse, false certainties must burn away. This can feel catastrophic to the ego, as if the very ground of life is being taken. But in truth, it is a necessary death, for only in the ashes of the old can the new self emerge. Individuation is resurrection, not into perfection, but into wholeness. And yet, this path is never completed. It is not a final achievement, not a static state one reaches and rests in. Individuation is dynamic, continuous, unfolding across the entire span of a lifetime. The unconscious is too vast, too mysterious to ever be fully known. The task is not to conquer it, but to remain in relationship with it, to walk with it as a companion. The individuated person becomes a traveler between worlds, the outer world of society and the inner world of symbols, dreams, and archetypes. They are not trapped in either, but move fluidly between both, bridging the seen and the unseen. The danger of seeing what others do not becomes transformed on this path. At first, the vision isolates, terrifies, and burdens, but as it is integrated, it becomes the very material of growth. The insight that once separated you from others now deepens your relationship with yourself. The shadow that once haunted you now fuels your creativity and vitality. The burden that once threatened to crush you becomes the weight that grounds you, rooting you in reality. Individuation turns danger into transformation, isolation into authenticity, suffering into meaning. Jung often warned that without individuation, the unconscious does not simply vanish. What is repressed returns, not as healing but as destruction. The shadow appears as projection, as hatred toward others, as violence disguised as righteousness. The denied archetypes rise in distorted form, leading to fanaticism, collective madness, and psychic collapse. This is why individuation is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is the only way to carry the vision without being consumed by it. In the end, individuation is the most human of tasks. It is the struggle to become who you are, not by denying your depths, but by embracing them. It is the willingness to walk into the labyrinth of the unconscious, to face the monsters and the treasures that wait there, and to emerge not unscarred, but whole. It is the acceptance that you are both darkness and light, both order and chaos, both wound and healing. And it is in this acceptance that true freedom begins to emerge. To see what others do not is to step onto sacred ground, dangerous, uncertain, but filled with meaning. It is to walk through isolation, to confront the shadow, to carry the weight of consciousness, and to move slowly toward the wholeness of individuation. This path is not for the faint of heart. It strips away illusions, it demands sacrifice, and it often leaves you standing alone at the edges of what is known. But perhaps that is where transformation is born, at the boundary where vision meets darkness, where truth collides with fear. Jung reminds us that the unconscious does not give gifts without cost. Every insight, every revelation comes with its own trial. Yet it is only through these trials that the self emerges, the true center of your being that lies beyond masks and illusions. The danger of seeing what others don't is real, but so too is the possibility that through this vision, you are being called, not to escape the world, not to dominate it, but to bring forth something authentic, something whole. So the question remains when you find yourself face to face with truths that others cannot yet bear to see. Will you turn away for the comfort of blindness, or will you accept the burden, the shadow, the weight of consciousness, and begin the long, uncertain journey toward your own individuation? For in the end, the greatest danger is not what you see. It is refusing to see what has already awakened within you.